This is my top 5 mixing checklist. If you use this checklist on every track you make, then you will become a mixing god.
Number 5. Frequency range.
Hey guys, this is Rob Jody, let's dive into it. In a well-balanced music project, everything has its place. Ask yourself on every single track you make, does the track you just created fit into your project from a frequency standpoint? For example, you might want your kick energy mainly below 120, 130 Hz, and your bass sounds mainly below 300 Hz. Or you want your high drums, like your hi-hats, mainly above 8 or 9 kHz, and so on. Already before you create a track, you should have an idea. What frequency range do you want this track to be in? After creating the track, you listen to it and you might look at it with an EQ and you make a judgment. Maybe you want to cut off unwanted energy reserved for other tracks or other parts of the project. For example, very often you want to leave a space for the kick and the bass. Therefore, when dealing with an instrument track, you might cut everything below, say, 200 Hz. Maybe you want to add distortion, saturation to add some harmonics and to fatten your sound. Or you might want to boost certain frequencies with an EQ if you think it is necessary. If your track clashes frequency-wise with another track, but you don't want to cut the clash in frequencies with an EQ, then you can try sidechaining. That is, you duck one track as a whole, only certain frequencies, only when the clash in one is playing. Many of you might already know this technique, which is often used to duck the bass when the kick is playing. As always, you need to practice and to listen to music and to your references, and you get better and better every time.
Number 4. Stereo width.
Ask yourself on every single track, before and after you create a track, how does the track fit into your project from a stereo placement standpoint? Remember, every track has its place. For example, you might want your kick and your bass in the center, while having your heads far left and far right, and so on. You can use track panning or specific plugins to pan a track a bit to the left or to the right. When using an instrument, you can use sound design to control your stereo picture. You can also use specific plugins to artificially spread the sound left and right. Or, for example, what I like doing with my high drums is duplicating the track and pan one instance to the left and one instance to the right. It's a bit more work, but I think it's worth it. As a starting point, you might want your kick and bass in the center. The higher you get with the frequencies, the more stereo you want your sound to be. Finally, you might want your high drums, like the hi-hats, far left and far right. I would keep the lead vocals in the center as well. It needs experience again.
Number 3. Dynamic range.
Ask yourself on every single track, what dynamic range do you want your track to be in? Now I'm talking about the distance between the lowest volume and the highest volume. Maybe some notes are too low in volume, others some notes too loud. In these cases, you can use compression, saturation or manual volume automation to even the level. What about the unwanted attack moments? I mean the transients, like the very beginning of a pluck sound or a bell sound, or the transients of a drum track. You can use a compressor with fast attack and fast release, or a limiter or saturation to tame those unwanted peaks.
Number 2. Presence and density.
Ask yourself on every single track you make, how present do you want this particular instrument track or drum track or whatever track to be? Talking about presence in this context, I'm talking about how much upfront is the sound, how recognizable is the sound. Of course, the first thought you could get when talking about the presence of a track is volume. You might think, if you want to increase the presence of a track, you just increase the volume. Well, this is true though. You would not get a good mix or a good sound in most cases by just adjusting the volume knobs. That is because there are way more instruments you have to use to optimize the presence of a track in the context of the whole project. Let's talk about these. For example, you can boost or lower the presence by using an equalizer in the area between 2 kHz or 5 kHz. Or you can boost presence by using compression. Or you can add harmonics, that is higher, more recognizable frequencies by using saturation or distortion. You can add more layers to an instrument, for example by doubling the track and using a different instrument to push the track more in front. And of course, by using reverb and delay, you manipulate the presence as well. The more reverb you apply, the more you push back the track. So if you are working on an instrument track, for example, and you know that this track should be the most important track of the whole project, then you can remember these instruments I showed you to really push this instrument track up front as far as you like, while at the same time keeping the track inside the mix and keep it all coherent.
Number 1. Necessity and function.
Ask yourself on every single track you make, whether it is an instrument track or vocal track or whatever track, does this track have a function? Fatten up another track, give it necessary ambience or glue in the background, etc. If it is just so that you think it's a cool track and you're proud that you created it, you like listening to it, but it has no function in the current project, then leave it out. Don't keep it in the project. You could still save it for future projects. If the track is not necessary, then delete it. The reason for this is by keeping unnecessary tracks in your project, you lose clarity and detail. Most likely, they're completely unnecessary frequency build-ups facing issues you could prevent. The mixing gets more difficult, the sound gets worse, you water down your musical idea, you distract yourself away from your musical idea. And by doing so, you make it more difficult for you to express yourself as an artist.